It's pretty basic. It really splits up your plate into what you should be kind of filling your plate with certain portions. If you follow this method, you really will get all the macronutrients and vitamins and minerals that you need for that day. Eating a variety in moderation has been shown that you should be able to get all your essential nutrients in that way. Your macronutrients, those are going to be your carbs, protein, and fat. I'll just kind of go into that in a little bit more detail. Your carbohydrates are going to be your main source of energy for our body at rest. It is also the source of energy in quick oxygen depleted situations like sprints, jumping, throwing. In other words, these are like your anaerobic exercise. When you don't have time to make energy from your protein or fat, it's just a quick energy. It's created quickly for you to do those short bursting types of exercise. Your protein is obviously your body or your building blocks for building and maintaining all the muscle, whether it's your lean body muscle, the muscles in your stomach, your intestines, your heart muscle. All those need those building blocks to be continuing and maintaining. It is also a faster source of energy when carbohydrate stores are depleted. So when we're in an energy deficient situation, say if you're not eating enough or your carb stores are depleted, we will turn to protein sometimes, and that will cause problems down the road. But when we do eat protein, the body can only process up to 35 grams maximum at one time. So you want to be able to get those protein intakes in throughout the day instead of all at once. Your fats, those are going to be anti-inflammatory properties. They're also key components to all of your cells and your hormones. So if we're not eating enough fat, then we're not going to be able to regulate our body necessarily in the most efficient way, or even really be able to efficiently build those muscle stores or anything like that. It is also a source of energy in those longer duration, oxygen-rich situations, like your long runs. That's also considered an aerobic exercise, would be those longer duration type exercises. And then, of course, hydration is also just as important as everything else. Hydration really helps regulate your body temperature, helps you carry out any and all your normal bodily functions. And with hydration, that's how you kind of keep your electrolytes balanced. So then you're not passing out on the floor all the time, because that's what happens when our electrolytes are not in balance. But moving on to the next slide here, I know when you're in the dining centers, it can be a little bit harder to maybe follow that My Plate method. You have a lot of options. Serving sizes can be kind of funky, especially if you're in a hurry and whatnot. So here's some good rule of thumbs as far as what different serving sizes kind of look like according to what kinds of foods you are consuming. So one raw vegetable serving would be equivalent to like your hands cupped, just like that. And then when they're cooked, usually your vegetables are a little bit more flimsy, a little bit less. So it's about one hand cupped if you're having a cooked serving of vegetables. And really on your plate, you're going to want that serving to cover about half of your plate if you're following the My Plate method. So a fruit would also be, a fruit serving is about one hand cupped as well. And that can also count in on that half of your plate of your fruits and vegetables. Your protein source is usually about 4 ounces, is usually about a serving size. So either the palm of your hand or a deck of cards is a good kind of mental note. Usually a 4-ounce portion of steak, pork, any kind of meat item is going to be about 32 grams of protein, usually every time. And then your grains and starches, depending on what you're having, one slice of bread is actually one serving of carb or grain starch, or one hand cupped of, like if you're having rice, quinoa, those kinds of things. And then fats is usually about the thumb size, like butter, or if you're cooking with oils, that's about a serving size of your fats. And then the graphic to your right here is just a good overview of kind of where you can find your carb, protein, and fat foods. The colors in the middle kind of indicate, so like your beans, that's going to be a carb and a protein. They're very high in both of those things. And then the fats there in the middle, your eggs are going to be high in both the fats and the protein, salmon, turkey bacon, chia seeds. So that's kind of a good little graphic just to kind of know where these macronutrients are really coming from and the higher sources of those. So let's kind of gear this more towards what the goals in sport as far as nutrition are going to be. So everyone's a little bit different. So everyone in sport, we're trying to achieve and maintain our ideal body mass for our body. That's really going to look different for everybody. I think ideal body mass is where you feel the best. It's not necessarily a certain number on the scale or anything like that. It's where you feel like you are performing at your best. So you really want to try to achieve and maintain that. Preserving lean body mass, if we're not eating enough food, we're not eating enough of a certain nutrient, that can cause us to go into a certain nutrient depletion. And then sometimes that causes us to tap into the lean body mass. And at that point, we're not preserving at that point. And then maintaining proper hydration, electrolyte balance. If you're not doing this, you're not going to be performing at any optimal level at all. So that's definitely also a very important part. And then kind of what this is all about, you're wanting to fuel for your body for performance, essentially. And before we really get into that, I have a few questions that I just kind of want to have you kind of reflect on yourself. Is your body telling you something when you're in practice or after some meet or after a run? Are you not feeling well? Are you feeling like you are tired halfway through? Those are cues that your body is trying to tell you that something isn't right. You're not giving yourself enough energy, or you're not hydrating yourself enough. So really reflect on what you're doing now. Is it really working? Are you feeling your best? And could something be improved, essentially? Really, you can't out-train a bad diet. That's where we really do find ourselves being limited, is when we go back to the diet. And when we do try something new to see if it is helping us or not, consistency is key. You don't really want to try something right before competition, because that can really come back and bite you in the butt sometimes. So try everything out like in a practice setting before you were to try anything out before competition. So one big thing about nutrition in general, and especially in sport, is blood sugar regulation. Dietary carbs are broken down into sugar, that are essentially used for your quick energy. Different carb sources will be released in the blood sugar differently, depending how it's consumed. So here to the right is a graphic of that green line is representative of if you're just having, like, say, something that's really high in sugar. So let's say like a Starbucks coffee that's full of that sugar, or like a piece of candy or cake. There's really not anything else going on there as far as macronutrients. So it's really just going to hit that blood sugar, and your body is going to process it really quickly, and then it's just going to go straight back down. Whereas if you were to consume that carb source with a protein and or a fat source, a healthy fat source, it's going to take longer for your body to process that, and it's therefore going to also hit your blood sugar a little slower, and our body is going to have more energy over a longer period of time. So it is pretty important, the timing and the source of your food, for what kind of energy you're looking for. So really at the end of the day, consuming a carbohydrate source with fats and or protein prolong the release of sugar to the blood as digestion takes longer. And this will provide energy for a longer period of time and will prevent energy crashes. But say you're coming back from an energy crash and you're about to go on, you have a run or a race here within the next 15 minutes, that's when you'll want that blood sugar to be spiked up a little bit more rather than a long period of time. So that's just a little bit of background behind blood sugar regulation and how carbs will affect that. So really getting into the fueling for competition, I'm going to break it into before, during, and after. These are the biggest tips that I can really give you as far as the timing and the sources of what you should be eating. Really, you've heard this probably your whole life, that you should eat breakfast every day. It really ensures that your glycogen stores are replenished after your night of sleep. You're not eating there for a good 8 to maybe 12 hours. If you get 12 hours of sleep, I don't, but you might. But your glycogen stores are depleted there when you're sleeping. It's trying to keep your body energized, not really energized, but able to function. So your glycogen stores are a little bit lower after that night fast, and eating breakfast can ensure that you're going to have this energy for the day. It helps with blood sugar regulation, and it also ensures that those glycogen stores are replenished, and you're not trying to do that later on in the day. Make sure you're drinking water throughout the day. For athletes who are exercising on a regular basis, I would say 10 to 14 cups daily, around 80 ounces if you do more of the 80 or the ounces side of things. And make sure you're not doing that all at once, because that's when you cannot feel the best or feel bloated. And then it's also not really helping you in any sense later on. So as long as you're drinking throughout the day, good indicator is when your urine is failed to clear. I'm sure you've already known that fact, but just trying to drink throughout the day. When you do have a meal, doesn't matter if it's breakfast or lunch, before a competition or before a practice, you want to make sure that that staple meal is there about 3 hours before competition to allow for digestion and to, again, replenish those energy stores. When you are having a meal, I would really focus on eating foods with sources of your whole grains, your lean protein, fiber, low fat, and really listen to those body cues to tell you when you're full, so you're not over or under eating at all. Again, this is going to just help maintain muscle, keep those energy levels high. This is when you'll want the fiber source, because this will help with bowel movements here before you're going to have a competition or practice. And the fiber source, sometimes if we have that fiber right before we run or exercise, we can have a little bit of indigestion. So just kind of knowing how your body reacts to fiber. As I say, like, everyone's different. So just knowing how that kind of works for you. And then right there before you go on that run, or you have that competition, or you have that practice, you can have a snack for about 15 minutes before. Make sure it's a carb choice with some kind of protein or healthy fat. Kind of goes back to the blood sugar regulation, just so then you have that energy source for a prolonged period of time. Some good examples would be your apples and peanut butter, any fruit with nuts and seeds, trail mix, an energy bar, something along those lines. And then while you are in competition, or let's say you're at a meet or something, hydration is going to be probably the biggest thing for fueling well during competition. As the outside temperature does increase, you're going to want to alternate between sports drink and a water. That just ensures that your electrolytes are being kept at an optimal level. As we sweat, we lose sodium and a little bit of potassium, and those are the electrolytes that are going to be they cascade about everything as far as muscle contraction and whatnot. Fruit infused water is a good option, but I wouldn't replace that instead of a sports drink. I would replace a fruit infused water with water. There are a few electrolytes in the fruit infused water, but there's not necessarily enough to be sustaining. If you are starting to feel fatigued right before your race or whatnot, I know in track you're there all day, all night almost for those meets sometimes, and you just need that quick source of energy because you're on that energy crash at that point. A sport drink would be perfect to do at that point. Gatorade, Powerade, sport gels, or just a high carbohydrate food, straight carb, like a dried fruit in general, bread alone without that protein and fat, just so we can get that energy right to the blood right there and then, right before that competition or race. And then fueling after. Again, rehydrate as needed. Everyone's going to be a little bit different in how much they sweat. So there are numbers out there for per body weight loss. There's a certain liter amount you can drink, but like I say, everyone's just a little bit different. I really just use my urine as a good indicator. Electrolytes also do increase fluid retention. So if you do find yourself to be a little bit dehydrated or feeling a little lightheaded or something, if you add salt to your water, that'll help you retain that fluid just straight up and help you rehydrate just a little bit faster. Or just a sport drink can also do that. But at that point, sometimes we get a little bit too high on the sugar. So, and salt water isn't the best, but that's just a good way to quickly rehydrate. And then 5 to 30 minutes after a competition is the optimal time for the regeneration of muscle and replenishing those glycogen stores. So research has actually shown that 5 to 30 minute window is optimal in replenishing those. You want to shoot for that carb to protein ratio of about 3 to 4 carbs per 1 gram of protein. So in other words, 30 to 40 carbohydrates to 10 to 15 grams of protein. A prime example of this is your chocolate milk.
Ask your dad.
That has that optimal carb to protein ratio there. And you can't just have protein alone, because at that point, when you just have the protein, then it's also just converted right into that sugar to then replenish the glycogen stores, as our bodies will always favor the replenishing the glycogen stores before it goes to repair the protein. So sometimes we're not even utilizing the protein at that point. And then also for that PM meal, if you're still going to be having that night, that's a good time to again continue refueling those glycogen stores. Your metabolic rate is going to be a little bit higher, up to 6 hours after a hard workout or an intense race. So those glycogen stores are going to be continuing to kind of cycling through. This is also when you have a balanced meal with carb, protein, and a healthy fat. If you are sore, this is the time to increase that protein intake to about 35 grams. To promote muscle repair. Usually our bodies only utilize about 30 grams if it's not after a workout, but our bodies are just working a little bit more efficiently at that point that it can get up to 35. So no more. If you do 40 grams of protein, then that's when that extra 6 to 5 grams is going to be turned into sugar and stored away sometimes as fat too. And then quality sleep, of course. If we're not sleeping well, we're obviously not going to be performing well either. And this is also when we do a lot of our muscle repair synthesis. So if we're not sleeping, we're also not getting in that time to really rest and digest and repair those muscles that we're using. So this is just a good side of just examples of what to eat and when and what really the focus is at each point. Just kind of more of a condensed version of what I just went into and just putting it into food terms essentially. So this would be a good slide to just maybe take a picture of, just so you kind of have an idea of what to eat and kind of when. So I don't like to go through it too much, but yeah, that 3 hour before, again, it's just your whole grains, protein, fiber, low fat. A good example, peanut butter and jelly, or oatmeal with fruit, peanut butter, or flaxseed. 15 minutes before your race or practice, a small serving of carb for quick energy. And this is when you can also include the protein and fat. So your apples and peanut butter, perfect example. And then after, this is when we're really carb and protein focused. Chocolate milk, I've already kind of gone through that. Your protein shakes, that's also a good time to do those. Cottage cheese with fruit. So those are just some examples of some good foods to utilize and whatnot. So I'm just going to skip to the next slide then. And we always wonder, how does caffeine kind of fit? So the RDA has termed 400 milligrams of caffeine per day the recommended daily allotment. So you kind of got to know how much caffeine is in all of the sources. So I just kind of listed the main sources that we usually get our caffeine from. 1 cup of coffee, 95 to 100 milligrams of caffeine, 1 cup of tea. It really varies, and if it's decaffeinated, it obviously doesn't have any, but it can have up to 25 to 100 milligrams of caffeine. 1 energy shot is usually about 200, and 1 soda is about 40 to 50. So there has been shown that there is a little bit of an effect on caffeine in your performance. It has shown that about 3 to 6 milligrams of caffeine per kilogram body weight pre-workout or event can actually cause a small margin, about a 3% increase in your performance enhancement for endurance athletes. It just kind of puts us on that edge that we might need, just to do that little bit better. It's not a big margin. It was shown to be about 3%. I do have the reference in the back if you want to look through that research study. It was just a compilation of a bunch of them. So it was a meta-analysis that I was kind of looking through for that information. But this is also taking into consideration, this is best found, this 3% margin, if you're not having caffeine on a daily basis. Really only right before that time workout or event, as your body does build a tolerance to caffeine, and your body just becomes more efficient at breaking it down. So you essentially will need more to have any kind of effect. And of course, like anything, sources do matter. So your pre-workout usually has a little bit of caffeine in it. Your black coffee, obviously. There's also caffeine-containing granola bars out there. And I'm not talking about like your Starbucks, your Dunkin'. Those are usually going to be super high in those refined sugars. And that can also have like an opposite effect just because of how high of sugar. It's just going to have you go way up in the blood sugar, and it's just going to cause an energy crash. So if you're going to have the caffeine, you can, but make sure it's just the black, plain old plain Jane coffee. So, and then the good old chat about alcohol. So alcohol does actually affect our performance. I went through a meta-analysis. I was going through my performance books that I've kind of acquired through the years through my schooling, and I've really come to the conclusion about one night out consuming more than 2 standard alcoholic beverages causes an average 5-day setback in training. For women, the average or the standard drink is 1 drink, whether that's 1 beer, 1 shot, and for men it's 2. So the main effects include it causes a delay in efficiency in muscle protein synthesis. So we're not going to be repairing our muscles at the same rate, causing longer periods of soreness and unable to probably compete at that peak level. It also has a prolonged effect of interacting with calcium's ability to trigger to muscle cell excitement cascade. So your ability to use your speed, your strength, and your endurance, it just delays that just a little bit. And then it also depletes your glycogen, I've been talking about glycogen this whole time, but that's your quick energy stores, and it impacts your ability for the body to even store the glycogen on a longer scale. I put a little bit more into that, but it's very limiting, ends up being very limiting for those sprinters, throwers, jumpers that are going to be more in an anaerobic state of exercise. And then it also suppresses the central nervous system. It impacts coordination, balance, and reaction time. And honestly, those are all things you need to really be at peak performance. Also causes dehydration, which can cause headaches, higher chances of cramping, electrolyte imbalances, all those things. And then it also interrupts our ability to really achieve any kind of full REM cycle in your sleep. So you feel like you might get a good night's sleep because you pass out or something, but you're really not sleeping that good. You're not getting into that deep sleep. So that would be a little overview of what alcohol, the main effects. There are a lot of other things it does, but these were the main ones that were going to be the most pressing, essentially. So the key takeaways really that I wanted you to get from this presentation, really eat your breakfast. It really does provide a lot of benefits, gives you really good energy, just sets you up for the day. Fatigue during competition can be avoided with fueling properly. We hopefully already knew that. And then regular alcohol consumption really does impact your performance and your ability to reach that peak performance. There's a lot of delaying effects. Timing and consistency of nutrition is key. And just remember that everyone is different, and one thing that might work for your teammate may not always work for you. So, and then I can really, if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer anything, or if you were confused on something, I'd love to explain further or try to, but up to you.
I was going to ask a quick question about vitamin D.
Yep.
Around, we kind of run out of sunlight after a while. I was just wondering what your kind of recommendation would be on how much vitamin D to take.
Yeah, for sure. So vitamin D has been something that's been really huge in research lately. Actually, part of my research study for my thesis is going to be in vitamin D. I actually recommend for everyone, whether summer or winter, to be on a 2000 IU vitamin D supplement daily. It's really good for tissue formation, so helping with muscle repair. It's good for your immune function. And then, of course, like in the winter, obviously we're not getting in a lot of sun, and it has been shown that we don't necessarily absorb as much from the sun as what we once thought. So I think vitamin D, if you're going to take a vitamin, that's the one to take. And I would do that in a 2000 IU. It's going to be international units. If you find that, you can find that in Walgreens, Walmart, wherever. And to eat that with food, because it'll be better absorbed. So that's my tidbit on vitamin D.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Anybody else?
What's your take on taking magnesium supplement?
Magnesium. So magnesium might not necessarily, depends on, that's like one of those electrolytes. You can have too much of it and it can cause cramping, and if you don't have enough of it, it can also cause cramping. Magnesium can be found in a lot of foods, and if you, like I said, if you're kind of utilizing that MyPlate method, or you're feeling like you're eating enough, you're probably getting enough magnesium throughout your day. I wouldn't say you have to take a magnesium supplement. It's also one of those things that it's hard to get rid of if we have too much of it. So supplementation can become dangerous too for over supplementing.
Question.
Yep.
Okay. Sorry. So for when for people like me, like I work and stuff, I work throughout the day and then I have work on weekends and stuff. So how do we need to consume more as far as when we want to recover? Do we need to consume more so that we make up for being on our legs for a while when we're at work, yada yada yada?
So you're asking for when you're at work and you're kind of walking around, you're on your legs all the time, do we need to be eating more for that?
Yes.
Okay. So I mean, in a sense, yes. I mean, are you feeling kind of listen to your body at that point? I don't really have a lot of background information as far as what you're already doing. But I mean, if you're doing a solid 3 meals a day, snacking a little bit in between, like small protein carb snacks, I think you'll be okay with that. But just really listening to your body and really feeding into those cues. If you are feeling more hungry at certain times, making sure that you are obeying that cue and just having a little bit of something to subside that hunger a little bit. Or if you're feeling tired by the end, really tired by the end of the day, looking back and be like, okay, did I eat enough today, or did I get enough water today? Just kind of thinking back on reflecting on what you did that day. But yeah, I mean, when you're up in your feet, you definitely are burning a little bit more calories, so your needs are going to probably be a little bit higher. And especially if you're trying to recover after practice or after a meet, you're also going to be in a little bit higher of a state. So yeah, I would say with being on your feet all day, you probably do need a little bit more, either whether that's eating bigger portions or adding in a snack 2 or 3 hours after you eat, just a small protein carb filled snack.
Okay. And another question. I'm sorry. So, when it comes to the weekends, how, or our days off, when it's just an easy day, how should we shouldn't try to cheat it, right? We should still maintain the same 3 meal a day stuff.
Yeah, essentially, you want to be in a good routine. And again, same, even if it is like a rest day, you definitely still want to have those 3 meals a day, really focusing, making sure you're getting a protein source in at each. not overdoing it on the protein, maybe keep it about that 30 grams instead of going up to 35 if you're getting that high. But yeah, your body's definitely going to utilize that. Throughout sport, your body's always in a repair mode, so it can always be using that protein to help repair those muscles on those rest days. So essentially, yeah, just continue with the same routine you do on days that you are practicing or at a meet, and focusing on those protein foods too.
So, and so, because you just said like 35 grams of protein, because we need 100 grams of protein a day, correct? And
Depends, but I would say, and for an athlete, I would try to do about 30 grams of protein at each staple meal, and then making sure so that's going to be about 90 grams right there.
Yeah.
And then at each snack, I would say like just a handful of nuts, like peanuts, is going to be, I think that's 7 or 8 grams of protein there. So, I mean, those snacks don't have to be huge. Just a quick something that's full of protein, whether it's cottage cheese, a glass of milk, your nuts and seeds. Those are all going to be good little snacks to kind of have around that are also protein filled. So yeah, I would say around 100 would be a good goal. But like I said, everyone's just a little bit different. So we can't make a blanket statement that everyone absolutely needs 100 grams, because some might need more and some might need maybe a little bit less. But that would be a good goal.
okay, yeah, that answers my question.
Okay.
So this is really specific.
What was that?
This is really specific, but a lot of us eat sushi on the team. Is
Okay.
sushi one of those things that would be good, or would it be bad for us because the raw fish?
So in the population that I work with specifically with cancer, no sushi. But since we are healthy individuals, I would say sushi is okay. We're not on any kind of low microbial diet or anything. Sushi is also going to be full of protein, and it's also going to have a lot of those good fats associated with it for anti-inflammatory benefits to kind of help bring the inflammation down from the workouts we are doing. So that'd be a good option as well. Anybody else?
I did have a question, actually.
Okay.
Okay, so you were talking about when you drink coffee. So I drink a lot of coffee. And that if you're going for if you are going for the coffee route, to go with the black coffee and not with a lot of sugar in it. And you were also talking about electrolytes. So what's a way to get electrolytes without getting all the sugar with it?
So are you talking like through your coffee?
No, I was switching gears. So you were saying to not have all the sugar with the coffee. So then I was switching back to
Okay.
how to get electrolytes without all the sugar. Sorry.
Yeah. So kind of like I said, usually with our diets, fruit's has a lot of electrolytes within those. So if you're having a lot of fruit during the day, that's one way to kind of get it. But our body is really good at keeping the electrolytes where they need to be. So we don't necessarily need, when we're exercising, yes, we need those sports drinks, because that's the G2 is going to be the lowest in the sugar. But essentially, our bodies are pretty good at keeping that on a normal basis where it is. It's just during exercise is when we need to focus on it the most. So if you're drinking enough water throughout the day, our body will be able to normalize the electrolytes essentially pretty well, because we do get the electrolytes through our food as well. So just get those fruits in there. You can also put that in your water. But yeah, on the hot days, definitely, that's also the biggest thing. On hot days, definitely you're sweating more, so get those, alternate between the sports drinks and that. But like I said, the G2 is going to be the lowest in the sugar, because that's what I found at least. Or you could also take a Gatorade, dilute it for fill it halfway with water, and then that'll dilute it quite a bit too. So unfortunately, there's not a lot of really, really low sugar options as far as electrolyte drinks, except for Smart Water. I just thought of this. Smart Water is a electrolyte infused water, that brand. So that's going to have no sugar associated with it.
That answers my question. Thank you.
Okay, perfect.
Another question. Sorry. I'm on a stimulant medication, and whenever I take it, whenever I take it,
Mm-hmm.
I cannot eat.
Okay.
I have a hard time eating.
Yep. So you have like a low appetite then, it sounds.
Yeah, and
Okay.
so, and sometimes it would be like, I don't know.
Okay.
It sucks. So, and my psychiatrist recommended taking it, eating before I take my medication. But then by the time I get to lunch, then dinner, I
Mm-hmm.
don't care to eat. So how do I, like, try to kind of regulate that or whatever?
Yeah, so that's definitely a tough one. I mean, if you're finding that you're losing weight because the appetite is low, that's definitely something to bring up with your doctor to maybe look into other options, because at this point, definitely you don't want to be losing weight, and that's indicative that you're not eating enough or feeling yourself the best. They did make a good recommendation as far as trying to eat before you take the medication, but then the rest of your day, what do you do? Something you can try. I know it's hard to eat when you're not hungry, but setting alarms on your phone, or maybe instead of doing 3 big meals, because those can sometimes be overwhelming, doing more like 5 to 6 smaller meals throughout the day, with a protein source at each. And those small meals don't have to be a ton of food. Like you can count like a cottage cheese with fruit as like a small meal, and making sure that you just have a protein source at each of those small meals. They're not as intimidating when you go to eat them, but you're still more likely to eat more calories than protein than if you were to try and eat those bigger meals throughout the day, because those can be intimidating, and then you're just like, I don't want to eat all this. So that would be my advice. That is a hard question to kind of attack. But again, if you are finding that you're losing weight, definitely might need to bring that up with your doctor to look into other options.
I also have a question here.
Okay.
Would you consider a protein bar being a good option for a pre-practice snack?
So yeah, it just depends what the protein bar is. I would definitely look, those are sometimes full of those added sugars and refined sugars that we're not really necessarily needing in our system. So I would look at the label on that. I kind of always look at products that are going to be less than 15 grams of the added sugar. That's different than the carb content or the fiber. It should have a label row that says added sugar. I would look for a product that has less than 15 grams of added sugar. But yeah, a protein bar would be fine. It's usually got some kind of carb source with it. So as long as it's got a carb and a protein source, whether it's granola, like a granola protein bar base type thing, that'd be fine, I would say.
Okay.
For like before.
I have a wrapper here. Could I just like read this one out to you and see if it's okay? It's 21 grams of protein and 17 grams of carbs with 2 grams of added sugars.
Yep, that's definitely fine.
Cool.
Yep, that's perfect.
Thank you.
No problem.
If you're like eating barely anything throughout the day, like if you eat like 1 meal a day or maybe like 2, is like, and you work out as much as we do, is your muscle like deteriorating, or like what is your body doing?
So kind of, like you're not at an optimal position to be building muscle at that point. So if our bodies are finding that we're energy deficient, yes, we will start tapping into the muscle stores for that energy. So you're definitely not at any kind of peak performance at that point. So my advice to you would be break that into 3 bigger, medium-sized meals, maybe a few snacks. I know it can be hard, but you definitely want to be having a consistent energy source throughout the day versus at one time.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Anybody else?
Maybe one last question here. I was just kind of curious if you had any tips or hacks if someone's dealing with like an injury, like a stress fracture or like a pulled hamstring. Is there anything that they should try and take extra of or anything like that?
So really for injury at that point, again, our body's in a higher protein need. So that's when you really, really need to amp up the protein, give your body the ability to be able to heal quicker and more efficiently. If we don't have that protein available, that's when we'll again tap into our muscle stores for that protein. It's just a longer process. So just really focusing on the protein foods, the lean protein foods at that point. And then also hydration. Hydration is going to be huge for any kind of injury. When we're not hydrated consistently, that's when bodily functions are just moving slower in general. Signals aren't happening. We're just not as efficient. So the two biggest things as far as that would just be really focusing on your protein intake, and then also the hydration. One other thing, maybe do a multivitamin. The vitamins are really good at, or are big in like signaling cascades, just making sure if you're having a balanced diet, you're probably getting enough of the vitamins already. But just in case we're not, that's always a good thing to just throw in there just to make sure we're functioning at the optimal level that we can.
Thank you.
Yep. Anybody else?
Can I ask a question to like tag off that question?
Yep.
Okay, so I was told that like turmeric and K2 kind of help with those things. What is your opinion on that?
What was the last? Turmeric and
K2.
okay. So turmeric is an antioxidant. Essentially, it won't hurt you at all, but it not necessarily won't like jumpstart anything. It's more so in the fact of anti-inflammatory benefits. So therefore, it will kind of help bring inflammation down, maybe cause the inflammation to go down. But as far as a healing standpoint, not necessarily. It might help make it not hurt as much as for long. And same thing with the K2.
Thank you.
Yep. Anybody else?